I know some fairly liberal-minded girls, but I've never penultimated any of them in a solar sojourn. Or for that matter, been given any Norman tongue.
Welcome to episode 8 of the Blackadder podcast, where Ian's looking for a bit of Norman tongue.
As always.
Greg Norman.
Yes, what star?
Or Norman from Fireman Sam.
Norman Blates.
Our friend.
Our friend.
From Sledgehammer. You okay, Ian?
I'm not too bad, Gerald. How are you?
Gerald? Don't think so. Yeah, I'm okay. Looking forward to a sandwich.
Really? How would you define that?
2 pieces of bread with some meat in the middle. A Gerald. Anything you want to say? Any interesting tidbits? Or tidbits?
Tidbits? No, really. This is one of the episodes I always remember. I don't know if how other folks see it, but I think it's one of the better ones. It's one of my very favourites.
Certainly. And there is at least one iconic scene.
Yes, and some great lines.
Fantastic lines.
You picked out your favourite for later.
Certainly have. Okay, well, if you enjoy it that much, why don't we just begin?
Why not, indeed?
Do you have a summary?
As always.
Crack on.
In Ink and Incapability, Dr. Samuel Johnson seeks to gain the patronage of the Prince Regent for his latest book, the very first dictionary, but foolishly leaves it in the Regent's possession when he departs after a visit. When it appears Baldric has tossed the book on the fire, our heroes must somehow recreate the work before Dr. Johnson and his gang of famous writers rend them limb from limb. But are the trio capable, or is this an impossible task?
Very literate, Ian, thank you.
It actually wasn't my first version. I did have a really good summary prepared, but unfortunately it was burned last night.
Was it? Did you get the spine off it and just stick in?
Exactly. You can kind of see the thread running through, but it's not quite as good as the original.
Never is.
No.
This week, we begin in the prince's bedroom, and he is relieved to find out from Blackadder that he hasn't overslept.
It's only 3 PM.
Before he describes an insult that he received at the Naughty Hellfire Club the previous evening.
They said he had the wit and sophistication of a donkey.
Now this is a classic line straight away. Blackadder responded by saying, "Not so, unless of course it was a particularly stupid donkey."
And the Regent thinks this is a compliment or some kind of witty retort that he himself could have used.
Yeah, he complains that it's often the case that he can't think of anything witty or smart to say in the moment and only thinks about it after the fact.
Yes, and Blackadder can sympathise. He recounts a tale from history that goes along the same sort of lines.
What was that?
He talks of Sir Thomas More, who was burned alive for refusing to recant his Catholicism, who Blackadder assumes must have been kicking himself as he burned, that it never occurred to him to say, "I recant my Catholicism."
Blackadder certainly would have.
Absolutely.
So the prince decides that he wants to improve the perception of his intelligence and tells Blackadder how he intends to perform this miracle.
I shall become best friends with the cleverest man in England. That renowned Brainbox, Dr. Samuel Johnson, has asked me to be patron of his new book, and I intend to accept.
Would this be the long-awaited dictionary, sir?
Oh, who cares about the title, as long as there's plenty of juicy murders in it? I hear it's a masterpiece.
No, sir, it is not. It's the most pointless book since How to Learn French was translated into French.
You haven't got anything personal against Johnson, have you, Blackadder?
Good Lord, sir, not at all. In fact, I'd never heard of him until you mentioned him just now.
But you do think he's a genius?
No, sir, I do not. Unless, of course, the definition of genius in his ridiculous dictionary is a fat dullard or wobble-bottom, a pompous ass with sweaty dew-flaps.
Well, close shave there, then. Lucky you warned me. I was about to embrace this unholy arse to the royal bosom.
I'm delighted to have been instrumental in keeping your bosom free of asses.
Bravo! Don't want to waste my valuable time with wobble bottoms. Fetch some tea, will you, Blackadder?
Certainly, sir.
Oh, and make it 2 cups, will you? That splendid Brainbox, Dr. Johnson's coming round.
Is there anyone you know that you would call a fat dullard or wobble bottom?
A few, and there's certainly plenty of arses that I wouldn't like anywhere near my bosom.
It's reasonable.
Down to the kitchen, and a disillusioned Blackadder returns and moans to Baldric about this problem he has.
Well, yeah, there's initially a problem with the idea of a writer and everyone having a novel in them, isn't there?
Yes. I think Baldric has heard of Johnson, and he refers to him as the cleverest man in England. This doesn't help Blackadder's mood.
No, yeah, I think Blackadder says that there's cleverer people at the Guild of Village Idiots or something along those lines.
And we then discover why Blackadder is so bitter towards Johnson. It does relate to the fact that everyone has apparently got a novel in them.
Yes, and he produced his and sent it to Johnson, who essentially did not take it up. Blackadder's particularly dismayed that he didn't even receive a response. He thought he could at least have written to say, get stuffed.
Baldric suggests that it may be a case of sour grapefruits.
Yes. Did you like Blackadder's description of the tale?
It was something to do with domestic servitude, sizzling gypsies, and what else?
He said it's a giant roller coaster of a novel in 400 sizzling chapters.
Yeah, it taken him 7 years.
Yes, it's a searing indictment of domestic servitude in the 18th century with some hot gypsies. It's his magnum opus.
Yeah. Baldric then pulls out his own magnificent octopus from his trousers.
Yes.
And who do we hear about?
A lovely little sausage called Baldric, as I recall.
Yeah, can you remember the tale?
It lived happily ever after.
The end, yeah.
And Baldric points out that it's semi-autobiographical.
Blackadder tells Baldric to prepare a fire before being summoned upstairs to wait on the prince and his guest.
He does.
So we're back up to the prince's room, and a very wordy and overly wordy Johnson confuses the prince, and Blackadder has to translate that after 10 years he has completed his book, and I think we had a little clip from that at the top of the podcast. How does the prince console Johnson?
Well, he says that he's also a slow reader.
Johnson then proudly shows off his masterpiece that apparently contains every single word in the English language, until Blackadder responds with what?
Well, it's a mixture of the longest words he knows and words he's just made up, like contrafibularities.
Contrafibularities, yes. Now, the words that Blackadder makes up in this episode are fantastic because they're the type of words that you think... I mean, I remember as a kid looking up contrafibularities.
Yeah.
It sounded plausible.
It does.
And it's a very hard thing to do. If someone says to you, it's like if someone says, make up a name of an alien planet or something. Douglas Adams is actually very bad at this. I don't like a lot of the names. It's sort of full of Z's and X's and that type of thing.
It's a hard thing to do, and I think that's, if you're reading science fiction or fantasy novels, quite often for me, one of the things that pulls me right out of it is when the places or the people have ridiculous names.
Mm-hmm. I mean, they're ridiculous in that there's a sort of cliche about them. They sound like what you would do if you were making up a word, but these words sound so plausible. I think it's genius.
Well, my computer thinks that some of them are words, things like pericombobulation, phrasmotic, and compunctious.
Are you using Google Drive?
Yes, it is. Yes, sorry, I was thinking Microsoft Word, but yes, it is.
Yeah, I think Google Drive, if there are other people been using that word, it might not flag it up.
Maybe.
In any case, the prince isn't keeping up and thinks that it all sounds like Dago talked to him.
We've had this reference previously, haven't we?
We have. So Blackadder leaves to get the tea, but promises in front of an annoyed Johnson to return interphrastically.
Yes.
And this, you can see Johnson scribbling updates in his manuscript.
Yes, he's adding these words, I think, but without definitions, I guess.
Yeah, I think he's just taking a note of them and...
Maybe he researched them later.
Yeah. So after Blackadder leaves, Johnson tries to explain to an unimpressed prince what a dictionary is.
Yeah, George is upset that there's no hero. He thinks there should be a hero, and the hero should be called George.
Mm-hmm.
And he's somewhat confused by the suggestion that the heroine is the mother tongue.
Yes, and there is no apparent love interest.
Yeah, George thinks that mother tongue should be in love with the hero George.
There should be a murder.
But no one gets murdered, no one gets married, and no one gets in a tricky situation over a £1 note.
No. Johnson is angered and frustrated at these recommendations or suggestions.
Yeah, I think the Regent has got books pigeonholed. He thinks they have to be stories with a plot.
Yes. One of my favourite lines, and in fact I think this is my favourite line of this episode. He's astounded that it doesn't have a plot. He says, even he, who is as thick as a whale omelette, knows a book has to have a plot. I think I may have suggested over the years that a few people are as thick as whale omelettes.
I've never heard you say that, that's a relief.
Not to your face.
George insists when he's told it's a book that tells you what the words mean that he knows what the words mean. He speaks English.
Yeah, and Johnson has had enough of this and goes to leave. And he's met by a mischievous Blackadder on his way out.
Leaving already, Doctor? Not staying for your pendigestatory interludicule?
No, sir, show me out.
Certainly, sir. Anything I can do to facilitate your velocitous extramuralization.
You will regret this doubly, sir. Not only have you impeculiated my dictionary, but you have also lost the chance to act as patron to the only book in the world that is even better.
Oh, and what is that, sir? Dictionary 2? The Return of the Killer Dictionary?
No, sir. It is Edmund, a butler's tale. A huge roller coaster of a novel crammed with sizzling gypsies. Had you supported it, sir, it would have made you and me and Gertrude millionaires.
Millionaires!
But it was not to be, sir. I fare you well, I shall not return.
Excuse me, sir. Dr. Johnson. A word, I beg you.
A word with you, sir, can mean 7 million syllables. You might start now and not be finished by bedtime. Oh, blast my eyes! In my fury, I have left my dictionary with your foolish master. Go fetch it, will you?
Sir, the prince is young and foolish, and has a peanut for a bread. Give me just a few minutes, and I will deliver both the book and his patronage.
Oh, will you, sir?
I think Johnson is sceptical of this.
Very. But he agrees to allow Blackadder some time, and he is to bring the book to Mrs. Miggin's literary salon in 20 minutes.
I did not know that Mrs. Miggins had a literary salon.
She doesn't. I think it changes depending on what is fashionable at the time.
In fact, in the previous episode, she seemed to be working with Blackadder.
Mm-hmm.
And now she's got her own salon.
She's got her finger on lots of pies, quite literally.
Indeed.
So Blackadder has to get to work in attempting to change the prince's mind.
Well, that's easy.
How does he do that?
He tells the prince that everyone assumed he was joking and it was a good joke, and the prince can't get past the idea that people thought he did the joke with. This would work with Donald Trump, wouldn't it?
I think so, yeah.
It would exactly the same way. It would work exactly the same way. And he says, oh yes, it must have been a joke. He takes credit for the joke and agrees to become a patron of the book.
However, he has got bigger problems. Because when we entered, we saw that Baldric had a fire on the go.
I think Blackadder complimented him on the quality of the fire.
Mm-hmm. And he asks him for the book, the manuscript.
There's a bit of an issue.
What's that?
Well, first of all, they establish what the book is.
Mm-hmm. A big, papery thing bound with string or something like that?
Yeah. It was a big papery thing tied up with string belonging to the Beatty fellow in the black coat who just left.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently it has now been placed, and this is my favourite line, in the hot orangey thing under the stony mantelpiece.
Blackadder also threatens him how?
He says that if Baldric doesn't tell him where the dictionary is soon, then the booted bony thing with 5 toes at the end of his leg will soon connect sharply with the soft, dangly collection of objects in his trousers.
So yeah, Baldric has burned the dictionary. And the prince works out that it may not be possible for him to patronise it now in this condition.
Yeah, he says he can't, or it will be difficult to patronise a book if it's been burnt, but he's happy anyway because he's got his fire.
Mm-hmm. He is as content as a Frenchman who has invented a pair of self-removing trousers.
Fair enough.
Out in the hall, Blackadder threatens Baldric how?
Well, he's got this plan. They're going to go to Mrs. Miggins's, find out where there's a copy of the dictionary, and he's going to have Baldric steal it.
Yeah, but Baldric's not happy.
No, he's not going to hell for stealing.
Yes. How does Blackadder respond?
He says that no matter how bad hell is, he can do worse things with a pencil.
I think he says that a lifetime or eternity with Beelzebub and all his disciples would be nothing compared to 10 minutes with him and a pencil. So, down to Miggin's Salon. Who do we have there?
We've got Shelley, Coleridge and Byron who are boring around being boring.
Yeah, they're all affecting pretentious, artistic intellectualism, diseases and all sorts of foppish nonsense.
In a spot of obvious trivia, none of these folk would have been here at the same time. Samuel Johnson, I think, died when Coleridge was 12 and the others hadn't been born yet.
A little bit more of Eenopedia. I think Megan, she's laughing at them as they're doing this when Baldric and Blackadder enter, and he asks for hot water with brown grit in it, unless of course she started serving coffee. And he vocalises his disdain for the writers.
He does. He's not impressed. And the poets or the writers have a reason for being there, which they start to explain.
Yes, they're there to pay homage to the great Dr. Johnson.
They're very impressed with this dictionary.
Yeah, and Blackadder has to pretend that he is also there for...
Well, he uses it as an opportunity, asks if any of them have a copy of the dictionary that he can swat up on before Johnson arrives, which is really what he's trying to get hold of.
Yes, he is sorely disappointed.
Very much so.
So Dr. Johnson arrives, and what does he do immediately?
Well, he's asked about his visit with the prince, and he calls him an utter fool, and has a house filled with cretinous servants, and then he spots Blackadder, and he does an actual double take.
He says Blackadder is the worst of them.
He does. That's him recovering his composure.
Mm-hmm. And at this point, actually, Blackadder has it confirmed to him that there is no copy. He thinks it would be a pointless exercise. Now, that's a strange thing to say.
It's a bit arrogant, isn't it?
Yeah, why would you not? I mean...
Well, it might be quite hard to do, given they don't have any means of copying. They would have to handwrite another whole copy.
Yeah, but you would get some wee person to do that, wouldn't you? You wouldn't do it yourself.
Maybe. He says it would be like fitting wheels to a tomato.
I think
that'd be quite good.
A tomato car would be nice.
Yeah.
I would drive one.
Absolutely. Environmentally friendly.
Potentially.
Yeah. And Johnson at this stage points out that he would never lose the book. There's no reason to worry. And if somebody else lost the book, he would tear off his head with his bare hands and feed it to the cat. And then destroys his cup of coffee just by squeezing it.
Yeah, so Blackadder is in grave peril. Go back to the palace. And Blackadder has to inform the prince that he is going where?
He's going to Nepal to live as a goat.
In fear of being murdered.
It's quite similar to one of the disguises that Prince Ludwig had.
Sheep.
Yeah.
But the prince tells him it is terrible, but immediately asks if he knows any other butlers.
Any other butlers, yeah.
I like that line. So Blackadder points out that the prince himself may look a fool.
Yeah, they'll call him Thick George.
Yeah, who has the brain the size of a weasel's wedding tackle. And this changes his attitude.
Absolutely. It spurs him into action.
Unfortunately, Baldric has something to say.
I have a cunning plan, sir.
Hurrah! Well, that's that then. I wouldn't get overexcited, sir. I have a horrid suspicion that Baldric's plan will be the stupidest thing we've heard since Lord Nelson's famous signal at the Battle of the Nile. England knows Lady Hamilton is a virgin. Poke my eye out and cut off my arm if I'm wrong.
Let's hear it then.
It's brilliant. You take the string, that's still not completely burnt. You scrape off the soot and you shove the pages in again.
Which pages?
Well, not the same ones, of course.
Yes, I think I'm on the point of spotting the flaw in this plan. But do go on. Which pages are they?
Well, this is the brilliant bit. You write some new ones.
Some new ones. You mean rewrite the dictionary. I sit down tonight and rewrite the dictionary that took Dr. Johnson 10 years.
Yep.
Baldric, that is by far and away, and without a shadow of doubt, the worst and most contemptible plan in the history of the universe. On the other hand, I hear the sound of disemboweling cutlasses being sharpened. It's the only plan we've got. So if you will excuse me, gentlemen.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's the first time we have actually heard the phrase, "I have a cunning plan," being uttered.
I think so. I don't recall an earlier one.
I mean, they have referenced plans.
They've had plans that were cunning,
Yeah.
or plans that were so cunning, but I think this is the first time the phrase itself is used. In the next scene, he says, "Beam me up, Scotty."
Both Baldric and the prince then offer their help, but Blackadder fears it may be as much use as a barber's shop on the steps of the guillotine.
Yeah. They make a good effort. They ask, they get "a" as a word for A.
Mm-hmm.
Then when Blackadder asks for something that starts with AB, they say honey.
Yeah, not incorrect.
No, that's true. It does start.
Blackadder tells them it doesn't matter, he will do it himself, as he's missed out aardvark anyway.
That's it.
So he asks Baldric to make him 2 slices of bread with some meat between them.
And Baldric's reference is?
Lord Gerald sandwich. Blackadder says, yep, make me a couple of rounds of Geralds.
I think we tried to refer to this earlier on and it didn't really work out very well.
Nah.
Time passes.
Yes, later that night.
Edmund is sitting at the desk with the dictionary, candles are flickering, and George and Baldric enter.
Yes. Unfortunately, he has not managed to get past aardvark.
Medium-sized insectivore with protruding nasal implement. George is confused, it doesn't sound like a bee to him.
So the aardvark's a bloody aardvark.
Not the first one. Not the first one.
So they tried to lift his spirits. Apparently, the prince has done B.
Yes, he had a bit of trouble with belching, but he got it sorted out in the end.
And then he riffs and says, oh, there we go again. Baldric, however, has completed C.
Yes, it's a big blue wobbly thing that mermaids live in.
Blackadder has resigned to their lack of help. He asks them, what about D?
They've got dog for D. Do you like the definition of dog?
Not a cat.
Accurate.
To an extent, yes.
Yes. It might not be complete, but it's accurate.
At this, Blackadder informs the prince that he's going to hack his own head off, but the prince responds with some cavalier indignation.
Yes, he's going to have Johnson executed.
Yeah, I mean, it's only a book, and Johnson should either be beheaded or dismissed, but when informed by Blackadder that in these ages he can't go about doing that, a resolute prince suggests that they just get on with writing the bloody thing. It's not like eating 10 raw pigs for breakfast.
It might be okay.
Raw?
Rare pork steak? Nah, it wouldn't be good. Nah, you're right.
He says, good lord, they're British, and under his breath, what does Blackadder say?
You're German.
So Blackadder orders coffee and tells Baldric that they are doomed if he falls asleep and doesn't get the job completed. We then have the iconic scene that I mentioned earlier.
Mr. Blackadder, time to wake up.
What time is it?
Monday morning.
Monday morning? Oh my God, I've overslept. Where's the quill? Where's the parchment?
I don't know. Maybe Dr. Johnson's got some with him.
What?
He's outside.
Ow! Are you ill, sir?
No, you can't have it. I know I said Monday, but I want Baldric to read it, which unfortunately will mean teaching him to read. Which will take about 10 years. But time well spent, I think, because it's such a very good dictionary.
I don't think so.
Oh, God, we've been burgled!
I think it's an awful dictionary, full of feeble definitions and ridiculous verbiage. I've come to ask you to chuck the damn thing in the fire. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything in my life, sir.
I love you, Dr. Johnson, and I want to have your babies. Sorry, excuse me, Dr. Johnson, but my Auntie Marjorie's just arrived. Baldric, who gave you permission to turn into an Alsatian? Oh, God, it's a dream, isn't it? It's a bloody dream.
This is followed by the real awakening.
Yes, so the scene is played out again, but it doesn't have such a happy ending.
Yeah, the first part of it's exactly the same up until Blackadder questions whether Baldric's going to turn into an Alsatian.
Yeah, and we have a less understanding Johnson and his literary entourage in tow.
Were you concerned by the threats of Lord Byron?
What was that?
He said if they do not bring out the dictionary, in his passion he will kill everyone by giving them syphilis.
Yeah, not the best way to go, really.
No.
So they barge in and threaten Blackadder, as you mentioned, who tries to bluff his way out of things, but that fails, and things look dire when Blackadder admits the truth. What happens next?
Well, before he admits the truth, he says, what dictionary would this be?
Mm-hmm.
Did you not enjoy Johnson's story about the writing of the dictionary?
Remind me.
He says it's taken him 18 hours of every day for the last 10 years. His mother died and he hardly noticed. His father cut off his own head and fried it in garlic in the hopes of attracting his attention, and he scarcely looked up from his work. His wife brought armies of lovers to the house who worked in droves so that she might bring up a huge family of bastards. Blackadder interrupts him at this stage, suggesting that his elaborate bluff has not worked.
But his skin is saved by the very casual entrance of the prince.
Yes, carrying the dictionary.
Yeah, reading it.
Wasn't burned after all.
No, he praises it and offers his patronage, which changes Dr. Johnson's attitude, and he dismisses his crew.
Yes, they're all happy. There'll be no murder today, and they're going to go to Mrs. Miggins for a royster later on.
Curious about what the prince was interested in, he notes the words that have been underlined and is annoyed why.
Because it's all the rude words. Bloomers, fiddle.
Turnip. Turnip's not a rude word, Ian.
It is if you sit on it.
Did you do that at school, when you're in primary school?
I've never sat on a turnip in my life.
Don't knock it until you've tried it.
You're sitting on a turnip right now, aren't you?
Yeah, only the one.
Just the one.
Yeah, two would be...
That giant one that Baldric had.
They move on to discuss the most important issue at hand. What was that?
The works of the mysterious Gertrude Perkins.
And Blackadder proudly reveals that she, sir, is me, sir.
And George is surprised.
Yes, so Blackadder tries to prove it.
But he cannot because...
Well, he's going to try and prove it by showing that his signature matches that on the manuscript.
Yes. The excitement builds as Baldric is sent to retrieve the novel.
Yes, the big papery thing tied up with string, just like the thing they burned the last time.
Exactly like the thing they burnt the last time.
So he can't produce it. Why?
They burnt it the last time. Which explains the survival of the dictionary.
Of course. Blackadder then excuses himself for a moment and he leaves the room. We hear an outburst.
From outside the door, it's, oh God, no!
So he comes back in. Baldric hands over his novel to Dr. Johnson,
who is devastated to realise that he missed the word sausage out of his dictionary.
And Aardvark.
I don't know why he leaves, though, without the dictionary.
He's quite forgetful. He forgot it the last time.
That's true. He just gets emotional and storms off places.
Yeah, and also, I mean, he said it would make all of them millionaires, so he's had a devastating loss as well at this point.
That's it. Anyway, the Regent and Blackadder exit, and Baldric picks up the novel.
What does he do with it?
Tosses it on the fire as the credits roll.
I think it was well tied up, this episode. You know, it was, it felt very complete.
Yes, it was bound. I really enjoy this episode. I think it's very clever, very nicely done.
Yes, I agree. I thought Dr. Johnson was played very well by Robbie Coltrane.
Always very good.
Will we talk about Robbie Coltrane?
Why not?
Coltrane was born in 1950. Now, he always seems to play, certainly in the UK, a sort of street, tough, Scottish Glasgow, you know, maybe a hard man sometimes. But he is actually from a very, very well-off family. He was educated at Glenalmond College in Perthshire, which is very prestigious, before he went to the Glasgow School of Art, and I think he also studied at Edinburgh University. He was nicknamed Little Lord Fauntleroy.
Why?
By his classmates, and
for being so posh.
For being so posh, and I think this was in fairly arty establishments where there would have been a few. So yeah, he's not as quite as street as you might think, or he might like you to think.
Perhaps.
And in fact, this is mentioned in one of Stephen Fry's autobiographies. I think subsequently Coltrane has suggested that he felt perhaps bullied or intimidated by the Oxbridge sets when he first went down. But Fry pointed out that actually he was probably posher than all of them.
I think I remember reading that as well.
So Harry Potter, Brave, the
Yeah.
animation. GoldenEye, the comic strip presents. Tutti Frutti was his big break, I think, in the UK. Fitz, another one.
Yep.
Cracker, Nuns in the Run, The Pope Must Die, Al Fresco, and apparently was considered for the role of the 8th Doctor Who. Now, I'm not sure who that would have been.
Was the 8th not Paul McGann in the TV movie?
Yeah, that made sense around about that time.
Yeah. He'd have been interesting, but I think there's enough Scottish Doctor Who's. This, of course, being his second Blackadder appearance after the belly laugh that we heard during Blackadder 2 that we commented on in the podcast.
Let's look at a biggie this week. Tony Robinson,
Oh, okay.
who plays Baldric, Sod-off Baldric.
Sir Tony.
Born 1946, he has starred in all seasons and specials of Blackadder, as you would expect. As well as Blackadder, he has appeared in Casualty, Doctors, Brannigan. Now, Brannigan was an old John Wayne movie. One of the first times I noticed Tony Robinson, he played a biker, he had a small part in that, but yeah, Brannigan's not too bad. Smith and Jones, The Young Ones, Who Dares Wins, Teenage Health Freak, My Wonderful Life, Maid Marian and Her Merry Men. Did you enjoy that?
Yeah, of course.
He was the narrator in the Fly on the Wall series Airline,
Okay.
one of the first big Fly on the Wall
Yeah.
shows in the UK. History Hunters and The Time Team, along with lots of other history-related.
Yeah, I mean, Time Team's usually famous. He's done that for a long time.
He has. Around the world, he's maybe more famous for that. I'm not sure.
Perhaps.
Don't know how much exposure that gets in the States and what have
I'm
you.
not sure. He's very popular on Twitter and very active, engages with people. Also, watch out if you
Well-
talk about him on Twitter, because apparently I've seen him at least once recently calling out someone that didn't refer to him using his handle, but just talked about him.
Okay. We'll need to see what we can do with that then. Yeah, as well as Time Team, etc., he's been coast to coast, time travels, time crashers, walking through history. I think he likes a bit of,
Archaeology.
yeah. Author of 17 children's books and the narrator of a lot of Terry Pratchett audiobooks.
Might look some of those out.
And very active in the Labour Party.
Yeah, so he's expressed some concerns lately
As you mentioned there, knighted in 2013.
for being Baldric.
Well, probably not. I think at the time he was a fair bit older than the rest of the cast. He saw Blackadder as his last chance at, making it on television.
Really?
Yeah, he was older and he wasn't one of the Oxbridge gang.
Right.
I think he felt the odd one out. I think it took him a long time to feel confident and relaxed in all their company. They came from the Footlights and all that type of stuff.
You can see why that would be intimidating.
Shelley, played by Lee Corns. Met him before?
We have. He was in Chains.
Yes, he played one of the guards. Byron was played by Steve Steen. He's been in The Bill, Spitting Image. He was the voice of John Major, Prince Harry, Ian McCaskill. The Press Gang. Did you enjoy that as a kid?
Don't remember that.
That's quite good. Julia Swalaha.
Swala.
Yep, who we'll be discussing on the Jonathan Creek podcast in the future.
Yes.
Yeah, it was about a youth newspaper.
Right.
Used to solve mysteries and crime.
It rings a bell. Maybe I
Dexter
did see
Fletcher
it.
was in it. A lot of famous faces from British TV that you'd have seen. They would know now that, we're younger then, obviously.
Yeah.
Spats and Rainbow, he was also in.
In Rainbow?
Yeah.
Was he the guy inside Bungle?
Can't say.
Okay.
Jim Sweeney played Coleridge. Born in 1955, he was also in The Press Gang, Never the Twain, One Foot in the Grave, Kiss Me Kate, and he is an MS sufferer and has had a stand-up show called My MS and Me to discuss and make people aware of the condition.
There you go.
A little bit of trivia. What have I got here? Do you want me to go first? Do you want to go first?
I don't have any trivia. You go.
Okay. In real life, Dr. Johnson took just 6 years to write the dictionary, not 10. And Robbie Coltrane had played Dr. Johnson previously in a one-man show which was attended by Richard Curtis and Ben Elton. Favourite line this week?
The orangey thing under the stone mantelpiece.
And mine's as thick as a whale omelette.
Of course.
Next time.
Knob and ability.
Correct. I should mention this episode aired originally on the 24th of September 1987.
Some time ago.
Okay. Anything you want to add?
Nope, just remind folks that if they can be bothered, it would help a lot if they can rate, review and subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts / iTunes, and come chat to us on social media. We're at Blackadder Pod on both Facebook and Twitter, and there's always a post up for each show on blackadderpodcast.com.
Okie dokie.
And we'll see folks next time.
Cheerio.
Bye.